Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the adventure, The Dark Tide of Damodan, designed by Crit Academy, aka Justin Hanlon, Garrett Thomas, and Travis Legg for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A recopy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/RogueWatson. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Andy, Manuel, Basil, Tom, and Huskar124. And Gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy Numa, Marcos de Vicente, Gilberto, Sean AK, Cert to be Adam, Dithers, Lounge Sam, Ross, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Fatboy619, Sklenia, Nick, thank you all very much for your support. The Dark Tide of Damodan is a adventure, I guess I call it a mini adventure, for Tier 2. It says levels 5 through 8 recommended. As you can tell by the pretty cool cover, it has a water theme. It takes place primarily in a dungeon, although not all in a dungeon, in a sunken keep in the water, starring a evil Marrow who is working for an aboleth, although frankly don't really need to know any of that. It's pretty straightforward when it comes to setting up the danger and having you go deal with the danger. There's not a lot of, big revelations or anything that you're learning, and the plot behind why the villain is doing what they're doing doesn't really matter. So it's kind of very surface level, which kind of, I guess, pun intended for a water adventure. It's not bad. It's just not. There's nothing particularly compelling about the way the dungeon is designed or the way the story is set up. I think it's very competent, but ultimately I didn't find it... well, let's go into it. There are things that I liked about it and things I didn't like about it. So, it has a nice art layout. I didn't care for the text layout as much, and what I mean by that is I think the background looks really cool and very thematic with the water. And it's obviously has artwork throughout, which is very nice. I think most of it is stock art, but fine. That's, you've got art in there that works for me. The actual text doesn't look great. You can see even the sidebars kind of blend in with the background. I don't know what font this is, but it looks like it's kind of Arial or Calibri, or just one of the basic fonts. And it doesn't do a good job of having these like headers stand out in a way. So just literally like underline and bolded. That's not. And it's interesting is usually it's people either go really nice layouts or no layout at all, and this is kind of somewhere in the middle where it's got some really good layout and then the text actually kind of takes it back a little bit. So kind of thumbs up and thumbs down on that. Well, we'll skip it. I don't want to skip ahead. Let's go back to the town. This is another comment of mine with the way the dungeon is designed. So the players are arriving in a town, as players do. They're either investigating... a bunch of people are getting sick, and if you know what that is, you can trace it back to the aboleth mucus, which I think it's a disease that aboleths can inflict on other creatures, which means they can only breathe water and not air, and that's something that's happening in this poor village. And it turns out it's this Marrow named Damodan, who is a Damodan, I don't know. Who is a acolyte of an aboleth. We don't see heads or tails of the aboleth in this adventure, so none of that really matters. But he has access to the mucus poison as kind of like a vial. I think they can just literally throw it at people, and they're basically just kidnapping people and taking them to the lair where Damodan has set up his mainly Kuatoa and some sharks and stuff. All very underwater themed units, and is capturing people to transform them into slaves for the aboleth. So. And there's not even really a long investigation sequence at all. Like, you show up in town and you immediately run into a battle in the docks where you are in the middle of this fight where a bunch of Kuatoa are basically kidnapping people. And the idea is they've already successfully kidnapped a number of townsfolk. You can repel the stragglers, I guess, and then you get to interrogate somebody that the townsfolk have already captured. So hopefully your players already do that and you can eliminate that part, but I guess that's included in there in case the players just kill everybody. Because otherwise you don't learn what's going on, because nobody really knows where these guys are coming from. But the idea is you can interrogate, you're supposed to learn all the information you can from this one Kuatua. There's Pilp, and he will eventually spill the beans. It does work like a skill challenge, and Crit Academy likes doing their skill challenges. They wrote an entire supplement on skill challenges. I've actually reviewed quite a few of Crit Academy's products at this point. This is the first adventure I've reviewed, interestingly enough, but I've already got like 3 or 4 up on the site. And one of them was skill challenges, and I did like the way they designed skill challenges. I mean, I know they're from 4th edition, and I think they're used pretty well here. However, you do kind of have to know this information from PILP in order to move forward with the story, so that's where it kind of gets a bit problematic, but it mainly comes down to like how much information you learn. So I think you're always supposed to learn where the dungeon is, basically. So the whole goal is just to learn where this dungeon is so you can go rescue people. Now, I like when you actually get to be a hero and not just go into a dungeon and loot it and get stronger. I mean, that's always part of the RPG process, but when you actually get to be a hero and do heroic stuff and save villages and save people, that really jives well with me. So I do like that this is specifically a rescue mission to go save the captured townsfolk from this dungeon. So that's a thumbs up on that. In order to get there, you can jump on a boat with this Captain Flint Ironshod, and the entire sequence is another skill challenge. Now, this is an example of where I think a skill challenge is used very well, because the alternative would be to basically just do random encounters or just get them there. And I think having it be essentially one big scripted event, which is this howling storm that's kind of come with the attack of the Marrow and the Kuatoa, you have to navigate through that by helping this crew with all their ship. And there's different things. There's suggestions. You can just try to hang on, basically. You can manage the sails. You can rescue people that have fallen overboard. You can repair things that are getting broken. You know, it uses a bunch of different skills, They've got different DCs on them. Or, you know, obviously as a DM and player, you can come up with some other way that the players are helping. The idea is you need to get 5 successes before making 3 failures. Now, the trick to doing a skill challenge successfully is not to do like a hard stop that you just like can't continue the adventure. Instead, it's you either succeed very well, or maybe you could partially succeed, or you don't succeed. But even if you don't succeed, you still make it to the destination. Instead, you just incur penalties, and that's, I think, the trick here. And that is what it does. In this case, if you succeed, you've got a certain amount of time to save everybody before they I guess, are they drowning, or are they... Each captive has 1d4 plus 1 hours of mucus's water-breathing effect remaining. Okay, so they will eventually drown. So they've got that mucus, that aboleth mucus on them. They can currently survive under the water, but they won't maybe last too much longer. So you get a little bit more time if you succeed, and then you lose a hit die due to all the exertion. If you fail, then you have a little bit less time to succeed, and you all gain a point of exhaustion for failing. So I think that's pretty good. I might change the success or failures, but I do like the way it engages everybody in the party. You make sure everybody has a chance to do something, and I think it's better than just throwing a bunch of random encounters or something. So I think that's a good example of one done well, and to me that checks the exploration box off, because anything that's basically not specifically socializing and not specifically combat is, you could kind of include as exploration, but mainly anything that involves like skill checks or saving throws, traps and all that, I think that counts. And I think the skill challenge of going through the storm on a ship is done pretty well. So, and I wasn't surprised to see a good skill challenge used here, because these guys literally wrote an entire product on that. And there is some socializing in town. You can meet with the villagers. There's a whole appendix at the end that showcases, hey, you can do some shopping in town before you actually leave, but with the caveat that you are supposed to be on a time limit. I'm not a big fan of time constraints in any game that I play. And in a tabletop RPG, that's really tricky, because it's just totally up to the DM and the players. And I get that resting is such a huge mechanic in D&D, and that if you can limit players' rests, that really puts the pressure on them, I think, in a good way. But it's very unsatisfying if you just end up trying to rescue people and it's like, oh, well, they drown. So it gets a little tricky to try and work that. And it really is up to the DM and trying to impart on the players. Hopefully, your players just pick up on the fact, you can tell them, hey, you calculate they've only got this many hours left as you go, and then you mention you might be able to squeeze in, 2 short rests in this dungeon. For sure, no long rest, because everybody would die. Which I like that component. Like when you start the adventure, After they learn what's going on, you realize, okay, you guys won't be able to long rest. And I think you can do that with this tier. You're on tier 2, levels 5 through 8. You should be able to make it through a dungeon, even though it can be very combat heavy, without a long rest. And that helps make the boss battle that much more challenging because they'll be drained, and still allowing them a few short rests, probably no more than 2, but that's probably how I would do it. So the bulk of the adventure, and keep in mind we've already done some socializing. We've got that interrogation of the Kuatoa. We've probably chatted with the townsfolk. We had a battle. We had a skill challenge. So we've already got a lot under our belts, and then we enter the big dungeon, which on the one hand is a cool idea. It's a partially sunken keep underwater, which I think is really neat and a cool setting for a dungeon. But first of all, the only map that I found was this map right here, which is teeny tiny and just embedded in the corner. And I can't stress this enough. If a bulk of your adventure takes place in a single dungeon and it's a big dungeon crawl, we need good big maps that I can look at and flip to. And for the love of goodness, definitely a separate player map I could give my players, especially obviously as somebody who plays on a VTT. So that's a big problem. Even though it does look like a full color detailed map, it's just not big enough. And I was just given this. I don't know if this is if you do get a separate handout file or not. In fact, this copy that I was given, I think, is out of date. They mentioned when they sent it to me that it was not finalized, but if you're going to send it to me, you got to be prepared for me to review it or send me an update, because this one does have some errors throughout that was definitely noticeable enough for me to make mention of it. For example, in this part, it says if the characters can understand him, he is mumbling, is referring to the Kuatoa you're investigating. And then it says, as the council, Elder Gundry Farborn greets you. So obviously that's just in the wrong place, and this is supposed to be included here. Some formatting issues. And then if you look at this map, there's no 10, 11, or 12, and I assume those are actually in here. They're just not included on here in terms of the annotation. And then if you look at here, it goes number 6 stables to number 8 training grounds. Obviously here's number 7. It's supposed to be the either entrance or gate entrance or whatever, but it's just not given a heading. So just a lot of just sloppy errors that just look bad, on top of having already a not good. I mean, this bare minimum, this needs to be a full page. Like, there's no reason to make this tiny embedded in the page. This looks like a perfectly fine map, but it needs to be much larger for me to tell what's going on, because so much of this relies on me being able to look at the map and tell what's going on. The other problem is it's an interesting three-dimensional map, and that's even more difficult for me to try to determine where everything is located, and especially, this is a big deal, which rooms are underwater. Because from the description, you come across this keep, and you can see, I'm quoting here, a portion of the keep's battlements appear to be leaning at an odd angle. A part of its base has collapsed due to the sediment below. So you've got, what does that mean? Like, is the keep part of it above water? I mean, it looks like it, and then this is all below water, and this is like the seafloor right here. Is that what I'm supposed to understand? So I had a lot of confusion on exactly which rooms are supposed to be underwater, and I get that a portion of the dungeon is supposed to be underwater. That's a big challenge of it. And it mentions if you don't have access to water breathing, you will have to drink that aboleth mucus, and that also puts you on the clock. Given those vials that you got back in the village, I guess they leave some behind, or you can just find some to allow the party to come in here. So that also puts them on a very interesting. That's actually a really good way of timing them too. Like, you've got this many hours. That's however many short rests you can try to squeeze in there while you've got that on there. But which rooms are actually underwater? And if you've got the aboleth mucus, that means that you can't breathe out of water, right? So you have to time it with going up in the keep, and is this keep above water? So I don't know the answer to that. It did not say specifically which rooms were underwater and which ones weren't. I just had to refer to this map, and this map is not big enough for me to tell. So that was a big bummer, because I feel like my attitude with this entire dungeon would have been massively improved if I had a giant map that was properly annotated to be able to refer to, and if it had very clear notes about this room is completely submerged, this room is partially submerged, this room is not submerged at all. Maybe even have a different layer on here, because I like the color and stuff, but just mention like, hey, this is the section that's underwater and this is the section that's above water. Is it slowly sinking as we're in here? Like, what does that information entail? So all of that created a lot of confusion on my part. In terms of the dungeon design, it's basically just a room-to-room combat encounter. The underwater thing does add some interesting elements. There's, like, in the middle of the courtyard is just a giant shark that roams around, and the idea is anytime you need to, like, cross around, you can just roll a stealth check to get past it. All the underwater combat rules apply, but there's not really any treasure to find. There's no secret doors. There's no traps. I guess there's one sort of, like awakened seaweed or something that attacks you when you make it up to the second room. Octopus is 4 awakened seaweeds. That's kind of a trap, but even that is really a combat encounter. Basically, it's all combat encounters. It's just every single room either has nothing or has a combination of sharks, merfolk, Koatoa, and Sawagan. In one room, there is a sea hag, which is supposed to be like the mini boss, who I think basically guards the first floor from the second floor, and she actually has the item. So you're rescuing people, but there's also the artifact that was stolen from the city, which allows them to, like, it's like a universal translator orb, and she's got that. And there's no dialogue whatsoever, which I think was a big misstep. Like, hags are one of the most fun, villainous creatures you can put in an adventure because they're full of dialogue. Like, hags always want to chat. They always want to go make a deal. I mean, hags and devils are basically your number one, like, villains in terms of being chatty with the players, and this one there is no real notes whatsoever. You pretty much just come across her, and it's just a fight. You make it all the way to the end. You're rescuing people. You actually get a bonus reward at the end, which I thought was really funny, depending on how many people you rescue, which was very video gamey, but I also kind of agree with that method. I think that was pretty fun. And you don't actually come across the boss, and then once you, I guess, decide to exit the dungeon, or you've gotten everybody, you've cleared it out, whatever metric the players decide on, when you leave, basically is when it triggers the actual final boss fight, which I believe, it does say use Koatoa and Sawagan for any patrol encounters may experience during their escape, but otherwise he just shows up as a final fight. And I don't think, what is he? CR3 is not very strong for a final boss fight that he shows up kind of by himself, even though it's at the end. He does have kind of a cool semi-layer action thing with, if he's fighting on the ocean floor, he can shove you into these geysers that shoot up. Those are kind of neat idea. Like, I wish those were more in play, like maybe some more environmental stuff going on in this dungeon, but otherwise I didn't think it was actually that interesting of a final boss fight. So I liked the concept here. I like the idea of rescuing people. I like the water theme. Of helping a coastal town who's being raided and having people kidnapped. But you don't learn anything about what's going on or the whys. Like, you don't get to chat with Damodan, you don't get to chat with the sea hag. It's just very kind of by the numbers going in, and you put on your aboleth mucus, you fight people basically the entire time, room to room. Now, you do rescue people throughout, and here is probably the strongest part of the adventure. There's 6 people, and they're all placed in specific rooms in the dungeon, and as you rescue them, they all have different pieces of information that can help you basically find another person, and you can kind of piece together the layout of the dungeon. That was a really cool idea that allowed the captives to give you a, like, functional reward. In addition to, a lot of them could be NPCs that join the party. They're not all commoners at all. There's a guard, there's a noble. It mentions each capture is a commoner with special knowledge or skill unless otherwise noted, but I think at least half of them were not commoners at all. Well, maybe 4 of them were commoners. I guess that is most of them. But you're supposed to rescue them, and they can help give you that information about where the others are. Some of them could join you as NPCs. I wish there was more information about how they might react to different rooms or situations. That might be asking for too much, because you don't really know. It would be hard to keep up with that many notes and information. And it does give you a nice little bit about, like, how much they're willing to help, and one person's like already been attacked by the that was also a confusing thing. One of them has already been, like, brought before the aboleth and came back, and he's got, like, the translucent skin. He's kind of slowly transforming, but we don't see heads or tails of the aboleth, and he's nowhere near here as far as I know. So I'm not sure. That's just kind of a tease for something that's not in this adventure whatsoever. But I like the idea of rescuing people, and at the end you can get rewarded depending on how many that you save, which is pretty funny. If you rescue less than 3 captives, fewer than 3, each character is awarded art from the temples, which is worth money. If the players return with 4 to 5 captives, they're awarded twice the amount of gold, and all 6, then you get an acre of land on a hill just outside of town. That's just funny. So, kind of mixed feelings on the whole thing. Again, I like the water adventure. It actually does feel like it's got a pretty good balance to it in terms of obviously plenty of combat, I'd say socialization, just because you've got that whole town thing first, and then you're rescuing people, and obviously you're being able to socialize with those people. And at the end, there's a lot of notes in this appendix, really detailed notes involving all of these NPCs, the 6 captives as well as people in the town. Now, if you're like me, you take one look at these pages and your eyes glaze over. On the one hand, I like having this information on the NPCs. On the other hand, this is not the right way to present information to a DM. I don't want everybody's life story, frankly. What I need are, do the D&D thing. Give me traits, bonds, flaws. Give me what that NPC wants, just one primary motivation, and a few notes on their physical appearance, and maybe any kind of like quirks they have. And that's pretty much all I need for the purposes of running an NPC. Now having some extra stuff on these captives is maybe nice. You can get more of a, drawn into them because they're a part of the adventure. But I think this was, I like having these notes. It's going to be on the pros, but I think this was giving paragraphs of story on these NPCs, I think was the kind of the wrong approach. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for the Dark Tide of Damodan. Pros, I do like that it's a rescue mission where each captive can impart information about the dungeon. I think that's a really cool idea. I like saving people, and I like that they are actual characters in there, and you get rewards if you save more of them. Some of them can join you in combat, and presumably there will be social, and that checks a big socialization box for the dungeon. Pro, the detailed notes on over a dozen NPCs. As I mentioned, I did put that on my pro with kind of the asterisk that preferably it would have been way better organized as just, traits, bonds, flaws, and then some applicable information I can use and not just their entire life story. Pros, I do feel like it is a solid balance of combat, exploration, and socialization. Plenty of combat. There's exploration through the skill challenges, and just in terms of going around a dungeon, and socialization, through rescuing all the people and being able to chat with them, and the interrogation with the Koatoa. So I think it does actually check all those boxes pretty well. Cons, I am going to have to put all the formatting errors and omissions as cons in here. It's just kind of sloppy, frankly, and just you hate to see it. And the other con is that the map is tiny and hard to tell what's going on, and especially with a dungeon that's partially submerged underwater, I don't think it does a good enough job of explaining which rooms are underwater and which ones aren't, and what the situation there, but what the relationship is with this keep and water. Basically, I was still lost on that and that's kind of a problem with having a top-down battle map, is it can be very hard to tell. There's just having this tiny embedded map is just really inexcusable for a dungeon that's based around, or for an adventure that's based around a single dungeon. Final verdict, a rescue mission in a partially sunken keep forms the compelling backdrop of a briny-themed adventure in the Dark Tide of Damodan. Thank you all for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. And you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.